If you've followed my channel for a while, you'll know that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is my favorite game of all time. It left a profound impact on me, whether that's for better or for worse, so when they announced Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I was excited, obviously, and everyone else seemed to be too. My personal history with the Xenoblade series is pretty uneventful. I first experienced the first game through Cheka Conroy's Let's Play, played the 3DS port when it launched, and then stopped caring for a while. I played Xenoblade 2 almost as soon as I got my Switch, and wasn't too crazy about it at first, until I restarted the game because I was sure I had missed something, and then it just all clicked when I went back through. Well, it didn't all click because the tutorials in Xenoblade 2 suck, but you know what I mean. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is the game that truly made me a Xenoblade fan. It introduced me to what is, in my opinion, the best story ever told in a video game. It introduced me to my favorite fictional character of all time from anything. It introduced me to how it feels to really and truly fall in love with every single aspect of a game that doesn't involve the word Torah. Same thing with Torn to the Golden Country on that note. I fell in love with it, though not quite as much as the base game. An incredible story, party, and world, and all for a short follow-up story in the expansion pass. It's incredible. And I'm happy to say that now that I've finished Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it allowed me to really feel all those things about a game again. I felt the same way all the way through Xenoblade Chronicles 3 that I felt at the highest highs of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I adore everything about Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Other than playing as half the party in their default classes, but that's besides the point. This video will go over my thoughts regarding Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I'll be largely leaving out my feelings regarding some of the more intensive parts of the gameplay because I played on easy mode based purely on personal preference, but I feel like I'm going to explode if I don't get all my thoughts about this game out now. There won't be any major spoilers in this video until we reach a certain part, and I will let you know when we reach that point so you'll be able to avoid them until you play the game yourself. There will be minor spoilers for things that were already revealed in the trailers before release and gameplay without warning though, so I understand if you want to avoid even that. Every single Xenoblade game is a story-best experience completely blind, and I don't want to ruin that for anyone. Now without further ado, here are my incoherent ramblings about a game that I truly adore. The first thing I want to talk about is the setting and its relation to the story, because it's real good. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 takes place in the world of Ionios, where the two factions of Kevis and Agnes are locked in an endless war. These factions are split up by what games the people they consist of came from, so in Agnes you'll see lots of Blades, Flesh Eaters, and Gormati from Xenoblade 2, and in Kevis you'll see a lot of High Entia and Machina, along with humans in both factions. They kill each other to add times to their flame clocks, large machines in each colony that determine their ranks and treatment by the castle, among other things. If the flame runs out, every soldier under that clock dies. Each soldier has only 10 years, or terms as they're called, to live. If they survive all the way to their 10th term, they get sent off in a homecoming ceremony by the queen of their nation. The game's party comes from both factions, with Noah Lands and Uni being from Kevis and Mio, Senna, and Taion being from Agnes. They're each at different terms, with Mio being in her late 10th term, only 3 months from dying at the beginning of the game. The game's story revolves around asking the question, why are things this way? Why is this world so terrible? Conceptually, the world is awesome, sure, but imagine you're born into a world like this. You're born at essentially 10 years of age, train for about a year to be sent off into combat that you'll very likely not survive, and then even if you do survive, you just die as soon as you reach drinking age anyway. It's a concept that's as unique as the rest of the Xenoblade series, and one that resonated a hell of a lot more with me than the first games, and pretty much equally as much as the second games. Each Xenoblade game has a single question at its base. Why is the world like this? In Xenoblade 1, why do the Mechonis and Bionis have to keep on fighting, and then later in the game, what do you do when a god turns against the world they created? In Xenoblade 2, why did the Architect create Allrest in the Blade system, and why doesn't he intervene? But in Xenoblade 3, there's a difference. You don't even have a starting point to begin to guess why things are the way they are, and neither does the party. We knew from the start that Xenoblade 3 would somehow connect the endings of the first and second games, but nobody knew how. It didn't make sense at all, and for me, the lack of sense that it all made in relation to the way things ended off in the first two games was one of the things that really drove me to keep on playing. I wanted to know how these two happy endings could have turned into what is, without a single doubt, the most desolate and hopeless feeling world in the Xenoblade series. I'll talk more about the characters and themes once we get into the major spoilers part, but for now, let's move on to the gameplay and how I felt about it. Now, the traversal in this game is weird. A lot of things that you could do from the start in the first two games are things you need to unlock now. You can't climb any surfaces other than ladders until you reach a certain point in the game, you can't grind on rails until even later, although to be honest, that was a minor feature that was only used one time in all of the second game, so that's a bit more passable. However, for the most part, it's exactly the same as the first two games. So let's just talk about the battles, because that's the part I have anything to say about. So battles in this game, I'm not super crazy about most of the system. First of all, Kevis characters. Noah, Uni, Lands, and any other Kevis classes you may equip from the heroes in the game. They are dreadful to play as. The way this was split up was by having arts recharge in different ways. Kevis arts recharge over time, like in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, while Agnes arts recharge by successfully landing auto attacks and cancelling arts, like in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The issue is, the recharge time on Kevis characters make it so you are almost never able to use more than one art per 5 or 6 seconds, and that wait time makes them incredibly unsatisfying and boring to play as in comparison to any Agnes classes. For reference, in most Xenoblade games, I spent 90% of my time playing as the main character in the party. I played as Shulk for the majority of the first game, Rex for the majority of the second, and Laura for the majority of Torna. In Xenoblade Chronicles 3, the majority of my time was spent playing as Mio. Now, I won't say that the Agnes arts being factually better was the only reason I played as Mio. Part of the reason was just because I feel she's more of a main character in the game than Noah is, but I mean, come on, they're factually better. This can obviously be combated by changing the classes of the Kevis party members to Agnes classes, but as someone who likes to keep the gameplay as close to the way things are in the actual story, I couldn't bring myself to do that most of the time. Noah did spend a lot of the time as a flash fencer instead of a sword fighter for me, but that was just because acceleration was a fun art. When I got to use it. You can have up to 3 Agnes arts on a Kevis class, of course, but the issue with that is that fusing arts is an important part of the battle system, allowing you to add a secondary effect to your class's main arts by fusing them with one of your arts from the opposing faction, at the cost of depleting the charge of both arts. If you use your Agnes arts instead of your regular arts, you're effectively sacrificing the ability to use fusion arts frequently, which just doesn't work out. Playing as Agnes characters, on the other hand, felt like a natural evolution of Xenoblade Chronicles 2's battle system. Canceling auto attacks and arts came naturally and were satisfying to pull off. Fusion arts felt more viable because instead of needing to waste my only useful arts to use them, I could just have a slightly more powerful version of a normal art every 12 to 30 seconds. It just worked. And this is in truth the way every class should have been designed. It's fine to pay tribute to both of the other games using the battle system, but that shouldn't have been done at the cost of making half the party inherently less fun to use in their default classes. It devalues the work that the sequel did to improve on the first game's battle system by saying, oh, well that wasn't an improvement, just a different style. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 just makes it way more jarring and obvious that yes, the way arts worked in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was a major improvement, and the way they worked in the first game should have been left in the past. But anyways, enough bitching, because chain attacks in this game rock. Now, I hate that the music interrupts boss themes. I absolutely hate that fact. But chain attacks take the best part of chain attacks in every game up to this point, while putting an original spin on them that makes them incredibly fun to pull off. Getting a good chain attack off is incredibly satisfying, especially when you manage to get an Ouroboros finisher with a damage ratio of over 1000%. It's incredibly satisfying to see a boss's HP melt from half to overkill during these things. Speaking of things that are awesome in this game, let's talk music. I'll be completely honest, I was a bit worried about the music in this game before launch, not because I didn't think it would be good, but because the main instrument used in the soundtrack is the flute. I am not a big fan of the flute, or at least I wasn't, but Xenoblade Chronicles 3 convinced me that yeah, this is an instrument that deserves to exist. I don't think this game's soundtrack is quite as good as the second game's, but it's at least on par with the first game's, with so many standout songs that I couldn't possibly name them all, and that's for more reasons than just the fact that most of them don't have official titles yet. A Life Sent On, The Weight of Life, and A Step Away are definitely some of my favorites, but I don't want to say that for certain until the official soundtrack sees a full release so I can listen to it on repeat for 2 months. And that's all I can really talk about without going into major spoilers, so this is your warning. From this point on in the video, there will be major spoilers for the plots and characters of every Xenoblade game that isn't Xenoblade X. You have been warned. The themes of this story resonated with me a lot. The idea of knowing that you're going to die soon one way or another and struggling to make your mark on the world as a result. And I'm so glad that the only character who really had to worry about this was Mio. Imagine knowing you only have 3 months left to live, knowing the entire world hates you, and still trying to do everything you can to change the world, not for yourself but for others. And having to deal with the feeling that everyone you love is absolutely terrified of the prospect of losing you, something that you know is absolutely unavoidable. It's an absolutely heartbreaking situation, made even more heartbreaking by just how goddamn lovable the entire party is in this game. This is genuinely the first Xenoblade game where I've given a damn about every single party member. Other than Torna, but that game only had 3, so it cheated. Noah and Mio have one of the most organic and realistic relationships I've ever seen in a video game. Yeah, that's right, I'm giving a point to the straight people on this one. This relationship is adorable. And for the first time in the series, the characters that don't necessarily lead the party feel like they matter a hell of a lot more. There's no more Ricky who's just along for the ride, or Tora who's just along for the ride and also gross. Everybody is there with a definitive goal that they want to reach in mind. Yes, the game does spend most of its time focusing on Noah and Mio, but I think that's for the best in the end. The fact that it gives Lance, Uni, Senna, and Tyon entire chapters focused on their growth while still focusing on making you fall in love with Mio and Noah's story is just incredible. As much as I love Xenoblade 2, I have to admit that even the chapters that focused on other party members still felt like they were trying to overshadow those party members by diverting all focus to Rex and Pyra by the end. Whereas Xenoblade 3 allows these characters to have their development at the same time. That feels like a lot of word vomit, so basically what I'm saying is Xenoblade 3 is a lot more focused on every character, while still deservedly giving more focus to Noah and Mio. I think that's a good way to describe it. Back on the topic of the game's theme, I've thought about that prospect a lot. What if I were to just drop dead tomorrow? Would I have made any real mark on the world? Would I have changed things for anyone? Would I have made life a little easier to live for anyone? And if not, then what was the point of it all? It's a depressing thought that can lead people to some dark places that are explored in the game through the main antagonist. You could argue that Zed is ultimately the main antagonist of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, as he is the final boss and is definitely the most evil character in the game. But N is quite clearly the main antagonist, at least in the same sense that Darth Vader is the main antagonist in the original trilogy of Star Wars. Another version of Noah who, upon losing Mio, decided to sacrifice everything, including his son, the city that he helped to build, and countless innocent lives, just to live an endless life with her. He made his mark on the world. He got to live in the endless now with Mio, but at the cost of sacrificing his humanity, for a while at least. And that brings me to my and many other people's favorite part of the game, the ending of Chapter 5.
Pick it up. You're an officer, so send her. What's wrong? Go on, send her. Isn't that your role? Isn't she your Mio?
been fun, Noah.
Mio!
This fucked me up. Until this point in the game, I had grown so incredibly attached to Mio as a character. Pretty much on the exact same level that I had grown attached to Nia in Xenoblade 2, to be honest. Sure, it was N who died in Chapter 5, not Mio, but I hadn't caught on. I know you hadn't caught on, and if you say you did, you're a goddamn liar. I sobbed watching this cutscene, genuinely sobbed. It's a prime example of how easy it is to get attached to even fictional characters, and I think that alone says a lot about how I feel about the game. Seeing the hope slowly drain from everyone over the course of a month locked in a cell, knowing full well that Mio, who they've been separated from, is doomed to die alone, that hurt. I was genuinely unsure if this game was going to have a happy ending here or not, because the game had permanently taken a potential party member from you at this point, being Ethel. Sure, she's a hero, not a party member, but you know what I mean. But at the same time, words cannot describe the relief I felt, realizing that M and Mio had switched places. That blew my mind, and N's reaction afterwards...
So, the one who died is...
It's a terrifying but incredibly realistic reaction. Utter denial, anger, hatred, and terror. All are reactions that one would realistically have here. I don't think N is quite as strong of an antagonist as Jin and Malos were in Xenoblade 2, but he's damn close. By the way, every time I say his name is N, I think of N from Pokemon, and I'm a little annoyed that there are now 2 Nintendo games I absolutely adore with a main antagonist named N. Anyways, that's all I really have to say about the game right now in this video. It's definitely one of the best games I've ever played, tied for my favorite of all time with the second game, in fact. If you haven't played the Xenoblade series, then why are you this far into the video? You were supposed to leave. Oh, also Nia is in the game and I absolutely love her. She's the same old Nia, but she's playing an act like she's really meant to be a mystical queen talking in riddles like a normal queen, but then Melia just says at the end of the game,
"Do not hide your stripes."
and she just says,
All right. Then let's thrash those goons, Melia.
Gladly. Together.
and I fucking love it. Thank you, Monolith, for remaining true to Nia as a character. I fucking love you, Monolith Soft. I love you, I love you, I love you. Thank you for watching.